Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, and welcome back to Responses to Critics, Suhaib Webb Part 5 on Quranist Network Television, QNet TV. Today we will begin with minute 16 of Mr. Webb's video, where he quotes, Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafizun, chapter 15 verse 9. Verily, it is we who descended a-dhikr to him, and it is we who are its protectors. So Mr. Webb says, okay, well, this shows that the Quran and Sunnah are protected by Allah. Does the Quran say, the Quran define a-dhikr as Quran and Sunnah? The answer to that is no. All we have to do is open other verses of the Quran to see what the Quran defines as dhikr. And for those of you who are unclear, dhikr is the oral, recited, memorized aspect of the Quran. It is the Quran which is being recited daily by the Ahl al-Dhikr, the people of dhikr. It is being recited and it is memorized, and it is, as Mr. Webb says, bil tawatur. Everyone knows it. So how does the Quran define dhikr? Please turn to chapter 36 verse 69. That's Yasin verse 69, where Allah says, وَمَا عَلَّمْنَهُ الشِّعْرَ وَمَا يَنْبَغِي لَهُ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا ذِكْرٌ وَقُرْآنٌ مُبِينٌ. So we have not instructed him in poetry, nor is it meet for him to do so. It is no less than a dhikr and a clear Quran. So that is dhikr. The clear Quran, the Quran which everyone knows, that is dhikr. It's defined as Qur'anun Mubin. And another verse which confirms that dhikr is actually the Quran is chapter 68 verse 52, which says, وَمَا هُوَ إِلَّا ذِكْرٌ لِلْعَالَمِينَ, and it is nothing less than a dhikr to the worlds. So it's talking about the Quran again, and it describes the Quran this time as dhikr lil-alameen. So the Quran is for the worlds, and we know that it's Quran Mubin, the clear Quran. It is not hadith or sunnah. Now, Mr. Webb, we now move on to minute 16.30, where Mr. Webb tries to demonstrate that people who had previous books, they did not care for them in the way that the Quran is being protected. Now, this point in itself is not the major problem, but how Mr. Webb comes up with the argument is an issue. Now, let me demonstrate for you. First, he quotes not a full verse, but the middle phrase in a verse. He says, Bima astafizu min kitabillah wa kanu alayhi shuhada. They were the protectors of the book of Allah, and they were witnesses unto it. Then he quotes another verse. It sounds like it's the same verse, but it's actually another verse. He actually went to another verse and quoted it and says, فَنَسُوا هَذَا مِمَّا ذُكِرُوا بِهِ, and they forgot part of what was given to them. So here it looks as if he made one point with one verse, when actually it was splicing two verses, cutting a phrase from one verse and cutting a phrase from another verse and creating a whole new verse. This is an inappropriate way to treat the Quran. The Quran should not be read half verse here and half verse there. Let me quote you the verses in full. The first verse is chapter 5 verse 44, which says, Inna anzalna at-Tawrat. It's dealing with at-Tawrat, not previous books. not previous books. If even you consider the Torah to be a book, it's dealing with one book. So inna anzalna at-Tawrat, verily it is verily we descended to you at-Tawrat, fiha hudan wan nur, in it is guidance and light. Yahkum biha an-nabiyyun alladhina aslamu, the prophets who submitted judge with it. للذين هادوا والربانيون والأحبار بما استحفظوا من كتاب الله وكانوا عليه شهداء. They judge with it, those people who are hadu, al-rabaniyun, wal-ahbar, based on the fact that they are protectors from the book of Allah and they are its witnesses. So here it is talking about the prophets. It's not talking about the other people whom the prophets are judging with. So this verse cannot be used to say that, okay, these people were in charge of the book. No, it is the prophets and Nabiyun who were in charge of the book. What was the next verse he quoted? That's chapter 5 verse 14, which says وَمِنَ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّا نَصَارَى, and from those who say verily we are the helpers, or some people say Christians, أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَهُمْ, we take their covenant, فَنَسُوا هَذَا مِمَّا ذُكِرُوا بِهِ, and they forgot part of what was given to them, what was reminded to them. So here it's not talking about a book, it's talking about their mithaq, their covenant with Allah. And I mean, I'm sorry to say, but you know, if we splice the Quran, we cut up the Quran, we put verses together, we will come up with interpretations which move away from what the verse actually says. And very unfortunately, Mr. Webb did this in minute 16.30. So I hope he looks at that, because this is no way to treat the Quran. The Quran should be read very carefully, all its words put together in the way Allah put it together. We don't splice them up and put them together. That's not the way to read the Quran. Right, we now come to minute 18, where a new concept is introduced to us, which says that part of the Quran is Noss, or text, or something agreed upon. It's so clear that nobody can dispute. Another part of the Quran is Zahir. Zahir means something which is apparent, but it's not Noss, it's not beyond dispute. And another part is Ta'wil. Ta'wil is esoteric interpretation, something which is not entirely clear. So Mr. Webb says, we are focusing on the Nas now, some parts of the Quran are beyond dispute in meaning. Now he uses the passive voice here. He doesn't say who is disputing, or who is unable to dispute, or unwilling to dispute, or whose dispute cannot be accepted. Nothing of the sort is stated. He just says it's beyond dispute. Well, for something to be beyond dispute, some people will choose not to dispute it, or be stopped from disputing it. Now he says, for example, that when you read the word salat, it means salat. Nobody can dispute this. Now whether nobody can dispute or nobody cannot dispute, that is not up to us to say. But Mr. Webb believes that he and his scholars own the text. They say that, okay, this is beyond dispute, everything else you can talk about. But let's get this straight. Who gave them the authority to do so? Certainly not Allah. Certainly not Allah. So the opposite of Nas, or text, or what is beyond dispute, is what he calls ijtihada. Ijtihada means things which you can think of. There is room for maneuver there. Here we ask the question again. Who defines what is Nas and what is ijtihada? We don't know, but they tell us what to believe. So they say no one is allowed to differ about Noss. Did Allah retract permission? Allah withhold permission for us not to be able to discuss this? No. Once again, they have taken it upon themselves to discuss, to define what is Noss and what is ijtihada, what they can discuss and what they can't discuss. This is again about power of discourse. Mr. Webb says, to continue that point, Mr. Webb says in minute 21, he says, if all the verses were Noss, all the verses were beyond dispute in meaning, we would all be forced to live like Bedouins. I must say I'm very disappointed with this, because if you read the Quran, there is absolutely nothing like living like Bedouins. The Quran does not mention living in tents. The Quran does not mention riding camels. The Quran does not mention living in a tribe or having, nor does it make it forbidden for us to move into new developments of technology. Absolutely nothing of the sort. If all the verses were Noss, we would have a clear, distinct philosophy on how to live, which would transcend both time and space. That is how powerful the Quran is. The Quran transcends both time and space. But Mr. Webb says we would be forced to live like Bedouins. No, the Quran is not a Bedouin living manual. It is a manual for all of us. So here, again, we come back to the point. There are people who believe that they own the interpretation. They own the rights to interpret the Quran. And we challenge this. Nobody has the right to interpret the Quran and say, my interpretation is the only valid one. Not even Quranists. Quranists defend the right of people to interpret. They do not say only our interpretation is valid. So with that, we close part 5 of Responses to Critics, Suhaib Webb. And we hope to see you for the final part, part 6. We hope that you've benefited from this analysis. Thank you very much for your viewership. Bye.